Good morning and welcome to Wednesday on Radio Row for Super Bowl 57. I'm Kayla Brett. I'm here with Roy Castle, Sports Philanthropy Network, with Diahann Billings Burford, CEO of Rise. Diahann, thank you for joining us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you guys for having me. This is becoming a tradition. I love it.
I love it too. So let's start from the very beginning. People all around the country maybe are like, Rise sounds cool, but I don't know what it is. Diahann, tell us about Rise.
Thank you. We are Rise as a national not-for-profit, and I love our vision. We think it's aspirational. Our vision is to create a nation unified, unifying create a nation, right, that is unified on issues of racial equity and social justice. And so the way we go about that is we think the answer is to educate and empower the sports community. Sports is this place where it's not that differences don't exist, but as humans, we figure out how are we different and unify all at the same time. How will we unify based on truth? And so our goal at Rise is to use that strength of sport, um, and just educate and empower that community to make us a better nation, right? To make us better organizations, and just tap into folks that this is their passion, this is what they care about. How do we support them in that work? So,
So, Diane, I have a question for you. In my circle in Milwaukee, we've been talking a lot lately about bias. You're aware of everything that's been going on in Milwaukee, difficult community right now. Can we speak about bias for a moment?
I would love that. I would love that. We actually had the privilege. We have a whole module, multiple of them, really based on bias, in helping folks to understand what bias is, helping folks to understand that literally all of us have bias, right? And so it's not, um, the goal is not to demonize people. It is to say, hey, we all have bias. Let's now look at how it shows up, and let's figure out how do we address it, and prevent it from showing up in ways that are really harmful to others, right? That's when bias is really problematic. And one of the places we start when I talk about everyone has bias, we all have it, and it's really based on the things we've heard, our own experiences, and human nature to take an experience and then apply a rule to it that we can use to move forward safely. But we have to be careful because those same biases that are based on our experiences, they can cause harm to ourselves, and they can cause harm to others as well.
Absolutely, Diane. That's an important message. I love the way that you say don't demonize bias. I think it is inherent, but I think your message on it is loud and clear. How did you get started and involved in Rise?
Yeah, what an interesting it was an interesting story. I was working at Time Warner, which no longer exists. And we were about to be acquired by AT&T, and I was super excited. I was going to get a severance package that was beautiful for the first time in my life. Um, and just as that was happening, a colleague from law school approached me and said, "Hey, there's this position I need you to look at. They're interviewing." And I was like, I don't know. I'm going to take my severance package and be like a volleyball mom. I have a volleyball player for a daughter and a football player for a son. Um, but I started interviewing, and you know what? When Paul Tagliabue is the first person interviewing you, you take a moment, you think about it, and it really was an opportunity, and I felt a calling. Um, Earlier you were talking about bias. I'm raised Christian. I was raised in a Pentecostal environment. I have tons of biases based on that. There are ones that I've had to really address and overcome. But there's also some great that comes out of that. And one of those things I think is just being aware of my purpose. What was I called to do? And I did feel like when I was interviewing for this position, this was something that a place I was meant to be. God meant for me to be here and to do this work, even if I did not necessarily feel like it at the moment. Much like Jonah, that's how he ended up in the belly of the whale, because he wasn't going where God wanted him to go. So I said, I'm not going to end up in the whale. And so
That's
I
right.
had those interviews, and for the truth is, one of the questions during our my interviewing process was, Diane, you don't have a lot of history in sport, in the sport business. And, that's something that we're really concerned about. And I, first of all, love the honesty. I need to be able to work with folks that I can be direct with and I can believe they're going to be direct with me. Um, and my answer was, like, literally, the people who are interviewing me are commissioners, assistant commissioners, CEOs of whole sports organizations. I said, guys, if your CEO is going to have any steep curve, that's the one. We could overcome that. And as we sit here at Super Bowl, I still remember my first Super Bowl with Paul Tagliabue. You don't have to know the sports business world if you can walk around with Paul Tagliabue at your side. And so it is something that I think I have. It is a curve I think I have addressed. I love this community, and I do believe the sports business industry and the sports industry is a community. And I'm proud to say now, I don't think anyone could say to me, "You don't know sports. You haven't worked in sports." So
Yeah, Diane, when you look at what you have, you really have a star-studded board of directors. As you said, commissioners, uh, executives from every different level in the sports community, and that can bolster that. But really, you're the one that's driving the train here. You're leading this charge. You certainly have Stephen Ross as the founder, lead of the organization, has set that tone. But the organization has evolved even in the few years since we first connected, I think, which was at the Super Bowl in Atlanta. And just looking at the amazing growth, talk a little bit about now what you see for Rise in terms of what you feel were your biggest accomplishments over the last couple of years and how you see the progress taking shape over the next 2 to 3 years.
thank you for that. I love that question, and I appreciate that you see that, and I appreciate that my board does feel that way. I just talked about Paul, but I will say Paul and Steve have really we talk openly about white men sponsoring women and people of color. And I think as a leader, they have truly sponsored me and they have truly said, we brought you on to lead this organization. How do we support what you're doing? And so I am grateful for that. And I think I think I produce a pretty good ROI. So to your point, one of the first things I did when I came in is we really clarified our mission. What we really sought to define what is success. Because we were a startup before I came in. And so, you know what I mean? You're trying to just get traction. I felt like we had at the point of traction, but now we needed to move to clarity. And so, I said we educate and empower the sports community. So success for us has been clarity on what we educate, how we educate, and who we educate. We also have clarified how we measure success. So we just finished our logic model and we're looking to create change in thoughts, change in attitudes, but also changes in behaviors, and not just by individuals, but by organizations as well. So we've got clarity there, and we did a lot of that in the first. I'm about to go into my fifth year of leading the organization. In addition, we have just prepared this for the board. I believe we have quadrupled the number of engagements that we do annually. So we just finished 2022, and I believe our number of engagements was over 600. And it might have been even 640 for 2022. Um, and what does that mean? That means we ran 50 multi week programs with youth across the country, from our Rise with the Rams all the way to what we're doing in Indianapolis with the Colts, uh, to what we're doing with Ben Simmons and another program with the Nets in New York. That means on the collegiate level, we were on more than 40 campuses last year. And we're working on a multi-week program for college students. That means in the pros, I will say professional, not only athletes, but executives as well. We have, I don't even know the right word to use for our transformation there. We now train, I think last year we trained 30 of the NFL clubs on exclusive leadership. And This year, we're training at least that many on microaggressions. But more than, it's not just the teams. We're training front offices. And I'm so proud to say that this year we now have had multiple teams say, okay, we did that. Hey, can we do a package of 6 for the rest of the year? That is not league involved, but just for our team. And so we have expanded greatly the amount of the sports community we reach. And then I would say in the years ahead, I just hired for the first time, we created the position of empowerment. We realized we would give ourselves like an A in educate and maybe a B minus in empower the sports community. So we have made a commitment and put resources towards a team that is really focused on how do we empower the sports community better, and how do we support the sports community that wants to do this work. So you'll see more of that in the 2 years ahead. A lot less sexy in the 2 or 3 years ahead. We're going to have to nail down a sustainable funding model. Right now, the board accounts for about 80% of our revenue. It used to be Steve accounted for 95% of it. We've gotten him down to only 50% of our funding. But as we continue to grow, the denominator gets bigger. So we've got to come up with some sustainable funding models. So I say the road ahead is continue to educate effectively, get better at empowerment, and really on the business side, keep working on how do we ensure that our organization is really strong from a financial standpoint.
I love it. Diahann, I want to say thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Sports Philanthropy Network is a commitment. Roy, I'm going to let you close us out.
Uh, Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Kayla. Diahann, on behalf of myself and Kayla, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and join us here at Sports Philanthropy Network live on Radio Row at Super Bowl 57. Work continues to do amazing work. We look forward to further exploring how we can collaborate and support you and deliver some of those programs and services with you in the coming years. Thank you for taking the time to join us. For all of our viewers and listeners, thank you for taking the time to join Sports Philanthropy Network live from the Super Bowl. Please remember to live generously. Thank you.
Thank you, Diahann.
Thank you guys. Keep